Hello, all, and welcome to another episode of the Market Pulse presented by Smart Touch. I am your host, Aaron Fichera, and today I have a special guest, Tim Donohue of CBRE. Tim, the man, the myth, the legend, welcome to the show.
Well, certainly that first part is right. I am definitively a man. The other stuff, who knows? But thank you, my friend.
No, for
Good to
those
be
that
here.
and Tim, we've shared conversations over the last few years. For those that are in the Austin market, you are a staple in real estate across. There's not a happy hour or social greeting that someone doesn't know you, and you know you just kind of light up the room. So
Well, I
I'm
appreciate that.
very
Soon it's gonna be nursery schools and play dates and playgrounds with a 5-month-old. And so it's the tides are shifting, but wonderfully so with a happy, healthy little lady. So
and I guarantee you that you'll light up that whether it be a gymnastic event or a
okay.
play date.
I look forward to it. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Happy to be here.
Well, for those that are listening, Tim is a senior VP at CBRE. For those that don't know or may have lived under a rock, CBRE is the largest commercial real estate and investment company in the world. Over 150 billion assets under management, spanning over 100 countries. And at the moment, you serve 95 of the 100 Fortune 100 companies. So if anyone has a pulse on the commercial real estate market, CBRE is the go-to resource.
It's a great organization to be working with. Their platform really is second to none, and it helps really like our team facilitate a number of opportunities to create disproportionate value, in my opinion, for the clients that we serve.
And for those that are listening, we primarily focus on residential, and but when we talk about real estate in general, and Tim, before we started, we talked about this. A lot of our times in our career, we have to make a fork in the road where we have to say you're either commercial or you're residential, industrial. I mean, there's always these different
Asset
subsections.
classes, correct.
Yeah, and it's you have to be a master of one or the other. But I feel, and I've kind of mentioned on some previous shows, this integration and that we're coming more and more live, work, play. The spaces that we occupy can't have residential without commercial or places to go, retail. So there's a symbiotic relationship between the two and the whole uh, ecosystem of real estate. So your insight is going to be extremely valuable. So before we jump into the current state, maybe you can give our audience a little bit of background of just how you got into real estate in general.
Sure, sure. And to be clear, I don't portend to be any kind of residential real estate expert, but to your point, Aaron, I think there's these synergies and kind of behavioral mechanisms that all real estate developers, commercial or residential, are making choices where and how to develop based on either where those folks are living
Mhm.
or where they're working, and the relationship between the two is maybe how we think about that live work play environment, or
Precisely.
largely geographies and how they intermingle. So my very boring history in real estate came out of a little bit of crisis. I graduated Villanova University in 2001. I kind of had some fun around the summer, and then said, I'm going to go get myself a job in New York City in September of 2001. And as we
Oh,
all
yeah.
yeah, as we all know, tragically, what happened on September 11th, I was getting ready. I grew up in the suburbs of New York City, and I was getting ready for a job interview and uh, on Wall Street. And lo and behold, the among the worst tragedies, if not the worst, to hit America happened that day, and I never ended up going to what was then my afternoon interview. And so, more important than my career was a shaken country and world.
Mhm.
So, when the dust settled, so to speak, I kind of got a job at just a big financial institution being a client service representative, but not working with clients, not servicing them, not representing them. There was a thinness to the job market at the time, which was understandable based on what was going on in the world. Fast forward after a year, I quit. It just wasn't designed for me or my personality. I ended up running into a buddy of mine at a Villanova basketball game, who was a couple years younger than me, and his father was a owner of a commercial real estate brokerage boutique firm in Westchester County, New York. And
Interesting.
I said, "Hey, Kev, is your dad the McCarthy of McCarthy O'Callahan? Because my mom said I should go work for those nice Irish boys." And lo and behold, it was. And lo and behold, I interviewed, and so it was very natural for a Donohue to join the ranks of those Hibernian legends. And I was able to learn a bunch for my first couple of years as cutting my teeth at a boutique firm where I really got some one-on-one tutelage for some really great mentors at the time. And then just fast forward after the financial crisis, as my career evolved, that small boutique firm got absorbed by a competitor, CBRE's. Eventually, I found my way to CBRE in Stamford, Connecticut. And then after the financial crisis, that particular market just wasn't doing well. And another Villanova buddy of mine, go Wildcats, had found his way to Austin, where he became a pretty successful restaurateur. And though I don't do retail, Aaron, to your point earlier about different asset classes, his network and need for help in real estate kind of ushered in an opportunity for me to move down to Austin with kind of some advantages from a networking and a day one work kind of opportunity. And so about 11 years ago, from the time of this recording, I found my way, making my way down to Austin, Texas. And it's been it's been the great decision of my life other than becoming a dad.
Okay. I
So,
love it.
and here we are. And here we are
Yeah.
now. I work for the two CEOs of my life, my two little girls. So
That's wonderful. And to be honest, if before we kind of jump into it, you've here in just the Austin market in Texas, you've gotten a chance to be a part of some really monumental projects and assignments. I don't know if you want to kind of touch on that. I know.
I have to be
Um,
a little sensitive about some of the particular clients, but here's a data point, Aaron. When I moved down here almost 11 years ago, the Austin market hovered around 41 million square feet of Class A office space. In just 10 years, it's closing in on 70 with plans for more. And that's in the same asset class. So that has nothing to do with the 15 million square feet of warehouse and logistics space. That has nothing to do with the hotels and multifamily. That's just one particular asset class. And so I think it's a testimony to what this city represents, what it defines itself as, and what opportunities it presents from both a quantitative and qualitative standpoint for those that are lucky enough to reside here, like you and I, that allow continued growth, not without its bumps, trials, and tribulations, but it still I still maintain that Austin uh, is maybe the ideal place to live, work, and play in America.
yeah, I would second that. I think
Yeah,
we have a great experiment ahead of us, especially with designing, what's the 21st century city look like.
that's right. That's right.
Eh, and I'm about to ask a loaded question because it's more about the current state, but talking
Sure.
about trends, you're talking about that nonstop growth over that 11-year period. Going into 2024, are we still seeing that same absorption rate that we've been seeing over the last decade?
You and your loaded questions.
Thank you.
No, we're not there. Within a very short amount of time, there was a lot of global macro events that occurred. Obviously, we all know about COVID. I'm I'm
Oh,
not kind of sage-like person talking about this, but it fundamentally changed the behavior and occupation of office environments around the world, and Austin was no different. In addition, the first war in Europe in 75 years, plus or minus, and I think some macro instability in various categories that we don't have to get into, but political, economic, etc. At the time that COVID reared its ugly head to the world, Austin was on kind of a hockey stick trajectory of space occupation, buildings being built underway. This isn't building magnificent, large trophy office spaces doesn't happen overnight. And so
mhm.
it takes years of planning and then years of building. So I think a couple of large assets got caught in a cycle where pre-COVID, if you were building a building in Austin, Class A, all things being equal, and by Class A, if we take a step back, that is well amenitized, well built, maybe some LEED certification, the gym, the conference centers, good location, close to amenities, like a true Class A office building. They were getting pre-leased. So that means before a building is completed being built, even there were leases
Somebody butts in the seats already.
not butts in the but signatures on documents that's
Yeah.
saying once we're able to occupy that space, we want in. And I think something like in the years leading up to COVID, buildings were getting pre-leased to a clip plus or minus 70% in Austin for
Mhm.
Class A office buildings. A number of assets, broke ground, let's say like January 1st, 2020, before the world knew that the world was about to change. And so what happened was once the train leaves the station, you have to kind of continue down the path of building. There's contracts in place with massive GCs and construction folks. And so this is kind of a monolith that moves and moves slowly, but it's like once it starts, the inertia is there and you can't stop. So I think there's a number of assets that are still trying to recapture some of the absorption that was underwritten originally. And so
Mhm.
Austin's vacancy rate is between 20 and 25%, which is historically a lot for this municipality as opposed to in the decade or in the 8 years of me being here prior to it hovered really in the high single digits, low double digits, 8 to 11%, if not lower in certain submarkets like CBD or what is known as the domain.
Mhm.
And so, in addition, we have two other factors. The mega tech of those some of those names that I represent that I can't really mention, their hiring practices have shifted, and or their uh, work from home, hybrid, FTE in the office policy have changed.
Well, and that kind of gets into that symbiotic or synergistic relationship because, you look
Correct.
to realtors or developers, residential, they kind of call out these capex or these large tech firms like, oh, Samsung, they're about to come into outside of Manor. That's going to bring in new jobs. That's going to bring in, a large pocketbook that's going to facilitate a type of home
Totally.
value, so,
That
but
large electric car company just due south.
yeah.
Absolutely.
And, but you touch on a point there too, because we are also dealing with reimagining the work from home, hybrid, return to office. And this has a large impact on both the commercial and the residential side. So what trends are you seeing, Tim, with your clients and or just across CBRE when it comes to work from home and the trend to return back to office or the hybrid? Because the only way we're going to reduce the 20 to 25% unoccupied is have people there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a great question, and maybe it's every 4 to 6 months. I think there's a behavioral shift, and all the shifts that have been taking place is folks are returning to the office. And I'll speak on behalf of Austin. There's something called Castle Systems. It kind of monitors, the fob systems, like when you go in and
Mhm.
you click in, and Austin's number one in the country in terms of return to the office, and they're hovering in the high 60s%. And that comes off pre-COVID of mid to high 70s. And so Austin, when you walk around in downtown at lunch, you feel the buzz, you feel the energy, you feel this. People are returned to work. We're having this interview. I'm in my office, and
Yeah.
my office is relatively filled today with colleagues and other business lines, etc. And so you start to look at the major financial institutions around the country. So this is kind of pulling the lens back a little bit and looking at the Mag 7, and they, for the most part, are generating new policies around minimum amounts of time mandated back in the office.
Mhm.
And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Um, the environments that are produced by these amazing organizations are now designed for people to enjoy being in the office, but the underlying link to that is that they're more productive, that they're more tethered to a specific culture. Like I work here, and by here I don't mean a location, but I work at XYZ company, and I have a sense of loyalty to it.
Mhm.
And so building out the high end inside your office coffee bar with the baristas, and for the companies that can afford that, and like, or landlords that are overbuilding tenant lounges. Like I'm looking over the screen at River South, and they have a beautiful tenant lounge. It's just not the standard you know conference room on the first floor, because no one wants first floor office space. It's one of the top floors of the building, and it overlooks this beautiful vista in downtown, and with a magnificent view of the skyline, of the emerging skyline of Austin. And so when you start to provide employees top-notch space that are amenitized, that give them access to the food and beverage options, the gym options, the yoga, Pilates. I have to run out and go to the FedEx store or get the gift wrap for the kiddo, or
Mhm.
and it's all within a close proximity. You start to provide them an environment that is superior to working from home or a coffee shop. During the time of COVID, I know, like, the dog was barking, the TV was on. What was supposed to be an 8 a.m. meeting or an 8 a.m. starts of the day turned into like 8:25. And if you times that by millions of employees, that speaks to productivity, that speaks to
Mhm.
accountability. Those tiny marginal differences really aggregate quickly. In addition, again, I'm looking over the computer screen and I see some very intelligent colleagues that I like ideating with, that that the water cooler talk to generate good ideas, to talk about more business, to talk about different elements, to crafting transactions, at least in our world. It's important to be around smart people.
Mhm.
Now, one thing that's interesting that we're noticing is that there's a general reduction, all things being equal, meaning headcount, meaning need for space, but there's a reduction of space. So the 25,000 square foot tenant before COVID that thought they needed more corner offices or more offices is now saying, well, instead of 25, we need 20.
Mhm.
And we can achieve the same amount of headcount, meaning number of people in the office. We can achieve the same amount of sanitary conditions so they're not packed into a phone booth. We can achieve the same amount of people that enjoy coming to work, but we reduce our occupancy cost, all things being equal, by that 20%. So 25,000 to 20 is a reduction of 20%. So tenants or employers or occupiers of the space, all same entity, are trending towards going towards quality of space, a flight to quality and a flight to what we call experience.
Well, and do you see that kind of in a similar vein into the hiring and labor trends where, you know, in the recent news, we're seeing, a percentage laid off, percentage here, but we also have to take in mind we had 3 years of overhiring and going into almost kind of the wild west of comp plans back and forth, shifting, people moving, jumping from one location, staying for 6 months, um, is it now getting to a
Great
point of
question.
just coming to, hey, we need to kind of plateau, not circle the wagons, but like you said, focus on the quality members and then let that be the foundation that we move forward maybe in the next 3 to 5 years with.
Great question. And I think it's hard to look in I think what you're maybe addressing is the headline employers, which is like the massive with
Yeah.
the massive groups. But for these, like, there's an amazing startup scene here in Austin.
Oh yeah.
There's an amazing emerging middle market, scene here in Austin, or the CPG world, consumer product goods. I'm always amazed at how many groups that are like made in Austin, started with like, I feel like it started with Tito and Tito's Vodka, and then there's been so many spin outs. And so there's a lot of great companies here in Austin that for the first time in a long time have an opportunity to go grab some talent when otherwise the prodigious the mega tech firms would just hire to almost to box people out, including their competitors. And so um, let's be very clear, for great companies, there's plenty of job openings and there's plenty of applicants for everyone. And so, as opposed to an extremely tight labor market where employees have almost complete leverage subject to qualifications, there's a little bit of a pendulum swing back to equilibrium where the uh, the employer can kind of start to dictate, hey, we have a 3 day in the office mandate. We have, you're going to show up for the quarterly rah-rah sessions or whatever it might be. And I, it's important, especially for company like fledgling companies, like
Mhm.
from a headcount perspective, that people are showing up because they're wearing the different hats. They're the utility infielder. And I love hearing the humility of a startup CEO who's like, he or she is the chief bottle washer, really. Like, I'll
Yeah.
just do whatever it takes. And so they want people typically who are, you know, an analog to their behavior, which is like, hey, we show up early, we leave late, we roll up our sleeves. And for that, you're getting equity in something we're passionately believing in. And so um, there are certainly a lot of job openings. There's certainly a lot of folks. There's just now a pool of talent that I think is larger than it has been. And I think the talent isn't so bold anymore as to say, well, if you're not letting me work from home full time, I'm not going to apply. They're like, I'll work. I'll come. Yeah, you got a cool office space. I'll come in.
Yeah.
Oh, it's close to my home, which brings us to like that other point about
Hmm.
multifamily developers and the symbiosis between making appropriate development decisions close to office space or easy access to office space, or you know there's Austin's very well designed, I don't know if by purpose, for having various price points of residential options for the various members inside an organization.
Yeah.
So to the west, you have, west is wealth, south are workers, east is hipsters, north are, creative families, right? And those are very broad terms.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think thematically, Austin, and I kind of used downtown as like kind of that focal point, but I like the fact that in speaking to various colleagues that I have at various positions with various compensation points, no one feels like the office is so much of like a socioeconomic island that, our front desk person is like, man, it sucks coming here because of blank. Like they're a wonderful person and they're able to get here and they live, 20 minutes away and I live 35 minutes away. And so it's a good balance, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And
No,
the choices that landlords are making.
yeah. No, and that gets to kind of the crux of today's episode is kind of understanding that relationship between the two. Um, well, we kind of dived into Austin and we got a high level. And have you ever kind of, and Tim, I know you're a student of history,
Well,
but
because of how
Texas,
old I am, all the gray hairs.
yeah, he was
I think I was a
there in the
part of it at this
beginning.
point. Yeah.
But I mean, to be in Texas versus good and bad economic times, Texas is always a great place to be historically,
Yeah.
as well as kind of leading in trends and technology and other factors, demographic shifts, and so forth. What are some other markets? You have a pulse
Sure.
nationally, and I mean, to be honest, globally, but for today's episode, how does Austin stack against others? New York or I know San Francisco gets
Yeah.
kind of a lot of the big headlines. BlackRock coming in, throwing the keys and saying, "Hey,
Yeah.
I don't want this anymore." So that
Sure.
seems to be an extreme case. But how do we fare, and what are some other markets you're seeing or interesting data points?
Yeah. There's definitely going to be challenges in various markets, and some opportunities in others. On the challenge side, there's over $2 trillion of commercial debt that needs to be refinanced in the next 18 to 24 months, plus or minus.
Yeah, to the end of
And
25.
yeah, and so yeah, we're looking down the barrel of about 19, 20 months. Yeah. And with that, there's some fear around the ability to refi because of reduced square footages, because of increased vacancy, because of increased concession package and trying to entice new opportunities to your asset. Um, then we have to look at the cost basis. And that's where I think Austin's got some challenges, right? There's so much new space and there's so much um, new product that it wasn't bought on the cheap. Like the secret's out. Austin's amazing. And so, in terms of like hounding for deals, I was speaking earlier today at a breakfast about the with the vacancy rate hovering about 22-23% here in Austin, that it's the tenant's opportunity via our transactional know-how to shine,
Hmm.
asking for things that 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago would have been laughed out of the room. We're able to ask for more concession for our clients. Uh, but you have to do it in a way that the landlord doesn't feel like scorn or just mathematically can't do it.
Yeah.
And so there's a balancing act about how to fight and be a fiduciary for your client while at the same time making sure that you don't try to get a deal so good that the landlord can't pay its bills and then your tenant will be in an insolvent, underperforming, non-operational building anyway.
Yeah.
You never want to be in a Class A office building or any building where the janitors don't show up because they're on strike, or the light bulbs in the parking lot don't work and it becomes dangerous. There's things that I think users, occupiers, tenants of space have to be kind of cognizant of. Let's go get you a great deal, but let's not go get you such a great deal that there's solvency risk.
Yeah. And it sounds
Uh,
like it has some ramifications for the tenant themselves. So you want to look for a
Correct.
win-win. There are some deals, but it's ideally
Right.
looking for a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, yeah, and I think if you're that aggressive, I mean, there's plenty of sublease space where some large tenants who just want to shed space, maybe have like fully written it off. And so there are not pennies, but there's dimes on dollars that deals that are out there. And that's an avenue we definitely explore for our clients as well. And we use it to leverage against direct space as much as possible. But ultimately, like sometimes the sublease space is the ideal candidate as well.
Well, I mean, into that same vein, I never want this show to be investment advice or,
Sure.
if I had a magic ball, Tim, we wouldn't be talking right now.
Right. Right.
I'd be
On the
on
beach,
some, yeah, on the
on an
beach.
island. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but you're right. There are deals. There are deals across all of the real
Sure.
estate. What advice would you give to groups, investors, developers looking at commercial real estate in general in today's market? Should they be looking at interest rates? Should they be looking at distressed properties? Where would you give them advice to start?
Well, one, they have to hire me.
Of course.
Yeah, of course. It's a great question, Aaron. But the greatness of the question probably connotes 15 questions behind it, right? Like I need to know like what, you know, are they cash buyers? Is it a 1031 exchange? What's their timing like? What's their preferred asset class? What's their operating history? Right? Like all the money in the world can't, like, you just can't go into Manhattan and buy an office building. There's a fraternity involved with that. And you're just not getting in.
Mm,
And so just like dollars don't always make sense. And so, there's even distressed assets in like a New York. I think if keys are given back to banks, the banks are going to that brethren that they've associated with for decades now. So, with that, the advice would be hyper diligence, and the baseball analogies. It's like I think with interest rates, it's probably if you can hit a double, hit doubles right now. Like go in, get go to stabilized assets, right? There's also so many smart people doing what in this ecosystem of commercial real estate that Austin, and this gets back to your question earlier about different municipalities, etc. Um, so um, there's not a lot of secrets in Austin anymore. They're just not. And similar to that, like other great performing markets, like Nashville is doing phenomenally, I hear.
mhm.
Miami, Las Vegas, that
Yeah.
and I think when you start to look at those particular markets, they're relatively newer from an office standpoint. And just to know, like this is from an office space standpoint.
Mhm.
Two, all the cities I just mentioned are in states without any state income tax.
So we're seeing a demographic shift and business. By that standard, you're saying business and secondarily residents are going to follow.
Or yeah, I don't know the cart or the horse, but if you know if the same dollars are being applied. I grew up in suburban New York City where it's like among the highest property taxes in the country, and then federal and then state. It I felt as though, just the son of two teachers, so I have a great educational legacy, but I don't have a great financial legacy per se. And I'm
Mhm.
not I'm not crying, but it's very hard to penetrate into an echelon when there are external costs that really really take a lot of money out of your pocket. And so I'm seeing a trend where employers, to either attract or retain talent, are making geographic decisions in places where they can boast, hey, we're going to even pay you a little less, but you're going to take home more.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a win-win-win, and those are good, those, Austin, Vegas, Nashville, Miami, like those are all pretty fun places too.
Yeah.
They're all like and I don't know that much about the demographics of Vegas, but the other three, they're trending younger. They're Miami on the water and beautiful, central Tennessee, and then obviously Austin with its lakes and universities. There's qualitative elements that make recruiting to those places somewhat easier, I think.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of white paper and data on that as well. And yeah,
Well,
sorry,
and
Aaron.
even kind of anecdotal, I have friends that say, oh, I want to move out to Vegas, but they're not gamblers. They're like, I really don't like the city, but the fact that it's the cost of living cheaper, and the fact that, hey, you 2, 3 hours you can be in California, 2 or 3 hours you can be in Arizona, 2 or 3 hours you can be South Rim, Grand Canyon, 2 or 3 hours Zion National Park.
And
Um,
because of Vegas being the nature of Vegas, the amount of direct flights for a relatively small airport is wild,
yeah.
like national. And so there's a lot of, I had a friend of mine who just rented like an Airbnb out there for a month to kind of um, do some job hunting in sports with the emerging Super Bowl and the hockey team, etc. And he said, the town of Summerlin, which is just outside of Vegas, it's quiet, and you'd think you would be in just a standard, good, big home suburb of any town of any big city USA. And
Hmm.
so, yeah,
Who would have thought Vegas
who would have
becoming a
thought?
family destination?
That's right. That's right. So
Well, so, you know, we talked about Austin, we talked about trends, and and one thing that we talked a little bit before jumping on is kind of adaptive reuse or converting assets. That okay, but there are some deals. They're not. Yeah, this is something that I'm fairly passionate about because we have a lot of space that could be turned into some really cool use. However, there are limitations based on MEP infrastructure, square
sure.
footage, being able to have, nobody wants a windowless room in the center of a
There you go.
building.
Yep.
So, I know you spoke recently on it. What are you seeing for the trends when it comes to converting assets and adaptive reuse?
So depending upon the asset, if you're talking office to residential, right? Because you can convert anything to anything. So I'm going to use that as the base case.
Yeah.
There's challenges, right? Because you talked about windowless windowless apartments, and that's tough. Anyone would go crazy. And but also, Aaron, if you think about the majority of office buildings that you've been to, how many sets of bathrooms are there per floor? One, maybe two.
Yeah.
And
Usually
so,
huddled around the elevator shafts too.
correct. And so, ripping out infrastructure, then trying to reinstall it to get you the number of required bathrooms is very cost prohibitive. In addition, if you look at a standard class A office building that takes up a city block, you're looking at massive floor plates. And if you're trying to avoid um, internal apartments like we mentioned, and maybe there's a way to have like amenity areas on every floor, like lounge, but then you really start to lose the ability to be efficient.
Mhm.
I mean, if you're going to go ahead and have a 4 or 5,000 square foot apartment, you know what you do? You buy a house or you buy a condo that's designed for that. And so I believe that there's cost and functional prohibitions to the general conversion of space
Mhm.
from from office to residential. Just then you look at the cost of construction is high. The cost of labor is high right now. Construction loans based on interest rates are high. I think there's probably some opportunities, most likely through some government subsidies,
Mhm.
where you can convert older, more obsolescent assets to something else, whether it's community centers or museums or uh, urban agribusiness. This is off the top of my head,
Yeah, yeah,
where I think there's opportunities to convert. But as it relates to the required infrastructure to convert from older office to residential, there's cases, but it's tough. Where there are opportunities, I think, are in older schools, right? Where
interesting.
they're more spread out. They have natural hallways. Like a classroom can be 1,500 to 2,000 square feet. In the science section, you have like some plumbing with sinks all throughout. And I've seen that particularly up in the Northeast, where I think like the Archdiocese of New York, right around the time of the financial crisis, started like shutting down some schools. And you have the big windows, like a natural hallway already. Like you don't have a natural hallway in office space other than maybe around the center core,
Yeah,
but then they're windowless or they're gigantic. And so I've seen a couple of like kind of cool conversions to kind of like lofty style apartments or like old textile factories in the Northeast. I think I saw a couple in Philadelphia that kind of had that funky, brick 14-foot ceiling, and you kind of make it work. And there's a marketing cachet, or there's a marketing opportunity to say like live in Philly's newest 105-year-old building. I don't know, but
yeah,
like
yeah.
something like that. But the traditional conversion is met with a lot of challenges.
So definitely gonna have its headwinds or at least challenges just to get over this initial period. And I would agree with that too. Without a sizable government subsidies or backing, because I know that you recently passed one, but that's primarily dealing with labor, with the material. It doesn't get into the design, the engineering, all the upfront work. So,
Correct.
to
All the
put up this
soft costs.
soft cost, yes,
Yeah.
that it seems like that's a lot to chew on, especially going into this market. So it may be a little bit of ways away, but I think there's an opportunity for a
Yeah.
public and private sector cooperation.
I think so. Like I have a friend of mine, Max Leifer, who's bought a lot of cool older warehouse type assets down on in St. Elmo, which is
Yeah,
South Congress, just go over Ben White or 71.
with
And
the hipsters and workers down southeast.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said it, not me. But with an eclectic demographic, shall we say. And
Bohemian.
and he's got some fun ideas about, you know, taking older warehouse assets and popping in the skylights and making it, you know, um, like a Williamsburg before Williamsburg was Williamsburg, Brooklyn kind of feel, where you have kind of historic assets that are converted into stuff, and more uh class B. So not like there's not going to be like full service fitness center gyms in there, but it's going to be like very cool architectural. The city of Austin's building a walking trail on a closed down rail line right behind it. And so there will be like a walking community there, and some elevated landscaping, almost like a Highline
Yeah.
version, light Highline light in South Austin. And so I think that'll promote a lot of cool growth there. For the non-gigantic organizations that want access to close to downtown, east-west corridor in 71 and Ben White,
Mhm.
north-south with 35 Congress, Lamar South First, and Mopac, getting over to 183 and then close to the airport. And then for the organizations that don't have limitless budget, but have budget to spend on cool office environments, contract-based workers or hourly workers, like even law firms. You just can't go double your hourly rate because you want a better office, because then you won't have the clientele per se, despite their best efforts. And so I think there's going to be fun, cool nodes that are developed out of a continuously growing Austin, where um, neighborhoods are going to be evolved and redefined, and it's
Yeah.
exciting.
No, it's great too. I joke because I'm on the south side too. So the St. Elmo, what they've done over the years, especially used to just be rows of old warehouse or kind of these like hangar warehouse that now are
Correct.
breweries and retail shops
Yep.
and boutiques.
And
It's
fun little
just,
restaurants. Yeah.
yeah,
And more to come. More to come.
yeah.
You know?
So it's great. And but I get your point that it's you have to be very selective when converting assets. It's not a silver bullet that, hey, something's empty, let's convert it, and we just solve the problem.
Correct.
Makes
Correct.
sense. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, I know as we're kind of rounding here towards the end of the show, I always like to ask the guests, what advice would you have for aspiring real estate professionals, or those that are beginning their journey at a firm like CBRE? What have you learned that you would pass your sagely wisdom down to the
Yeah.
others?
Well, one, listen to your mother.
That's good
That's
advice.
so that's that she said go work for those boys, and I did, and I've been doing it ever since. So that's one. Two, when I work with either our younger brokers or like our interns during our internship programs, I say, something that was told to me, and there's three reasons to get involved in commercial real estate on the brokerage or transaction side. Is one, you have the license to go make money, right? We're commission based employees. And so it's fun. It's gamification. It's competitive. It gets your creative and competitive juices flowing. Two, you control your time. So in over 20 years of doing this, I've never, had to punch in a clock, but or ask for a vacation. But out of respect for teammates and discipline of time, you're required to be diligent in your tasks. And so I say that I don't go on vacation, but I travel because I get to do work with my feet in the sand sometimes, or wherever I may be.
It's
And
that
so
work-life integration.
correct. So there's a beautiful freedom, but freedom's not free. In addition, um, there's an incentive to get involved with the community. When you can start to be involved with helping and networking and building out your personal brand, it's really wonderful. And so, as an example, for me, I'm getting deeply involved with a group called the Sentinel Foundation, which is a wonderful organization out of North Carolina, and their mandate is to help disrupt, eradicate, and end the practice of child sex work, child sex slavery around the world. And
Wonderful.
it's an amazing organization with wonderful people, and so uh, since I've gotten into my career, I've always been involved with nonprofits, um, both because of personal passions, but also because of uh, professional branding. I'd probably say this one's different because I've already kind of reached a pretty good branding. I think, I like to dot my I's and cross my T's. And so I've learned enough skill set and acumen in my career where I really feel like I can lean in to this organization and help. And if professional things come with it, great. But really, it's the absolute dedication and passion to what this organization is doing. So Sentinel Foundation out of North Carolina, the best group out there for helping children that are afflicted with the disease of moral corruption. So little plug.
No, again, for those that are listening, the Sentinel Foundation will definitely put out something to draw a link there as well. It
Yeah.
sounds like a wonderful organization, and especially a cause that is overlooked a lot of times because you're dealing with populations that don't have a voice to speak. So for people that are in power or in a position to speak,
Correct.
we should.
It's a whole other hour that I could get into about
No,
it.
ill for next time because
Yeah.
I, well, for those that have been listening, Tim, how can they reach out and contact you or CBRE? Where would they start?
Sure. I'm just at timothy.donahue at cbre.com. And I'm on LinkedIn, Timothy Donahue, CBRE in Austin. I think my photo is a little bit more austere than it probably should be, but as my friends like Aaron always know, I'm always trying to smile or get people to smile anyway. So a little austerity in the photo, but I'm happy to reach out and have conversations with good people doing good things, and building relationships and communities is something I love to foster and be a part of. So that would be great.
I agree. Your profile pic does not do you justice for the energy that you bring into the role.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, I'll fire that photographer. I just hope the camera didn't break when they were shooting it. So, but thank you, my friend. I appreciate that.
No, and thank you for sharing the knowledge with us and our guests. And again, I'd love to have you back on and kind of look back and were our predictions right? Are there trends that we have to be a part of? And again, just creating this forum for a larger dialogue around things that we're passionate about: business, real estate, people, the spaces that we occupy.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so,
Great. Happy to do it again, my friend. Anything for you.
Tim, thank you. And for those that are listening, thank you for spending time. And we'll hope to catch you next time on the Market Pulse. Have a great day.